When the glass breaks, we talk Vols here on RKW Tuesdays at 8:20 with the full crew in studio. Ramon Foster, Kayla Anderson, and Will Bowling. We are brewed by Scooters Coffee. Pleased to be joined by our friend Austin Price of VolQuest's and On 3. Lots to get into this morning on Rocky Top. Austin, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing great. How's everybody doing in Nashville?
Oh, we are excellent. Excellent, Austin. Joey Aguilar, reportedly going to be Tennessee's next quarterback. Austin, how quickly did this develop for Tennessee once Nico Iamaleava committed to UCLA? And what do you think the Vols like about Joey coming over from App State and now UCLA?
Well, I think when the initial rumors got out there that Nico might be joining UCLA, I think, Joey's agent started putting out feelers to teams, right? I think that's what any good agent does, especially, try to find a nice, landing spot for your client. And, once Nico made it official, Joey got in the portal, and then things were really accelerated yesterday afternoon. Once Joey got in the portal, he was on the phone with Tennessee staff, and his representation was on the phone with Tennessee, a good chunk of the afternoon. So, what do they like about him? Obviously, it's somebody who's experienced, throws a great deep ball, can move around and run if need be. A bigger kid, he's 6'3", about 220 pounds. Again, the experience thing is something I think that the staff really gravitated towards. Right now, you have Jake Merklinger, little to no experience, and then George McIntyre, who's a true freshman, so he has no experience in the room. And so, even if you were, basically looking at it from a Jake Merklinger is going to be the guy, you had to have a body. And so, there's some angst amongst fans. I think the fans, need to understand. I mean, this Tennessee's based off who was in the portal and who was willing to get in the portal. Tennessee got the best available, guy out there in Joey Aguilar.
Austin, with the way Joey fits into this offense, how concerned do you think people should be about the interceptions? And that's the thing people are going to gravitate towards, the 14 interceptions last season, in 10 in 2023. What can this offense do to alleviate some of those concerns and set him up to be closer to what he was in 2023 when he almost threw for 4,000 yards?
Yeah, I think I don't know what the offense can do. Obviously, that's a pilot in the box, so to speak. I mean, ultimately, like you've got to coach them to see certain things, but the kids got to make the right reads and know when to not throw it. Last year the decrease in production, I don't get as much worked up about that, just because they did not have a great offensive line. He was running for his life a lot, trying to force some things, just trying to make plays and did not have the same receivers he had the year before. So, again, Joey's got to have a bounce back. He's got to win the job, though. I mean, this is going to be an open competition, and that's the thing, is everybody anointed Jake Merklinger, QB1. I mean, how many posts did you see like that on social media, the day of the orange and white game, which I thought was silly because even though he's been here a year, and I would say he has the inside track over George, to discount George to me was silly because George has a lot of talent. And I thought, really based off people I talked to, had a nice close to spring practice the last week and a half, 2 weeks of spring ball. And then, I think it's silly to just discount Merklinger or George now with Joey coming in. I think it's going to be an open competition. Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley have to figure out, who gives them the best chance to win and go from there. But, it's going to be a crash course for Aguilar. I mean, you're not going to get here till, mid-May or so, and then you're going to have to crash course. And now, listen, Halsley can do Zoom after Zoom after Zoom and virtual, skull sessions and all that stuff to try to get him ready. But, this is still going to be a crash course, and it's going to be hard, but he's willing to take that chance and see if he can win this job and potentially do something special this fall.
Austin Price of VolQuest's and On 3 with us this morning. Austin, when you look at this Joey Aguilar situation, you got to go to the head coach and just his support staff, too, and specifically Heupel. I'm sure he probably felt like, it was a little bit of wronged in how he felt about how the Maliava family decided they wanted to strong arm UT at the last minute. Do you expect a different guy in him moving forward, man, just on how he handles guys, how he handles these situations, with how he's left the program scrambling at this point? What do you expect out of this version of Josh Heupel moving forward?
Well, I think he'll coach with a chip on his shoulder. He's going to be motivated. He understands that, all eyeballs are going to be on, this situation because in theory, while there's no trading, it's kind of a trade in this era. And so, all eyeballs are going to be on what Nico does at UCLA. All eyeballs will be on, if Joey wins the job, what Joey Aguilar can do here. And, at the center of all this is head coach Josh Heupel, who decided, and rightfully so, once Nico went to no-show mode, then Josh Heupel had only one decision to make. There was nothing else he could do at that point. And, but the eyeballs were going to be on Heupel, because Tennessee was going into this year with, still a lot of high hopes, some unknowns, but like a lot of key pieces back on a team that went to the CFP and a schedule that I think is still fairly favorable. You don't have any of these like gauntlet runs where you're playing Georgia, Florida, and all these teams back to back. You have Georgia in September, Bama in October, Florida in November, and then you have Oklahoma, but that's at home. Your road games, not counting the Syracuse game, which is in Atlanta, or at Mississippi State. They were not very good a year ago, and at Kentucky. Again, not a great roster. So the schedule was set up. So what can he do? I mean, he's done well with guys in the first year before. You look at what Dylan Gabriel did in his first year at UCF. Can he get that out of Merklinger? Can he get that out of Aguilar? Whoever wins this job, ultimately you're still taking someone who is going to be in this offense for the first time or a first-year starter with the guys that, are currently here. So it's going to be interesting to see how Josh Heupel handles this. But there's going to be pressure, and we'll see how he performs.
Austin, I like to talk about stuff that we can't control sometimes because there's no regulations on what anybody can do in the NCAA right now, specifically on the football side where it's two open windows. But watching essentially how the Maliava family pretty much strong-armed Tennessee and also pretty much got to buy one, get one when it comes to the brothers at quarterback, right? Do you think these coaches and programs will get to a point before Congress sets in or rules are laid out to where they say, not again? Because you had younger brother Renig, and, well, he can flip however he wants to on signing day to go to Arkansas. Now he's back at UCLA. Like, this scenario just in general has to put brakes on the way I would hope teams deal. Or is it just a desperation mode of I got to win games, so I'll do whatever I have to and take whoever I have to sustain my program the way UCLA has done?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at how, the decision Madden made on signing day altered the UCLA class, and then here just 3 or 4 months later, they're willing to welcome him back with open arms, is a bit, Deshaun Foster just doesn't have much, right? Like, as far as, he's a desperate guy. Nico's a flashy object. Nico's a talented kid, and maybe he goes out and performs well this fall and sets the world on fire and has UCLA in the mix in the Big Ten. But, there's not a whole lot there around Nico or Madden for that matter. And so, I will continue to maintain it's not the money, it's the portals. It's the portal windows. And that's where all this just gets blown into a million pieces. It's not the money. If you just went back to the old school days of, you have to sit out a year if you transfer, or even if you said there's a one-time transfer, that's it. But it's this unlimited transfer and all these different windows. I'll go back to Tyler Barron. When Tyler Barron can be at Tennessee, go to Ole Miss, get an apartment, stay a week or two, then decide to go to Louisville, go through spring practice at Louisville, then go in again and go to Miami. That's a problem. And I like Tyler Barron. Tyler Barron was always good to me. But, again, that's a problem overall when kids can just literally bounce to bounce to bounce with all these different windows. That's where coaches are like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Like, that's where the college game is suffering in all sports, but specifically football because they have the two windows. If you just said, we're only going to have the winter window. You're going to have to, whenever you make a decision in January or you're going to school, you're locked in. I think a lot of this would kind of slow down a little bit. There's always going to be posturing with agents. There's always going to be haggling over a little bit more money when it comes to NIL. That's fine. That happens at the professional levels, and in a lot of ways, college football has turned into a professional level. But it's the ability to just kind of come and go as you please. And, it'd be like, you're on your radio show, Ramon, and then tomorrow you're going to go over there and you're going to be on a rival radio station. Then, the next day you're back at 104.5. And then the next day you're going to go to a country station. And,
That'd be fun.
There's the problem. There is the problem.
It's like high school or college dating, pretty much. Like it's high school.
Dates.
Prom dates, essentially, what we got going on.
Hey, to put it in our world, Ramon, you weren't really dating. You were just talking. We're just talking. Is that a thing anymore? I mean, the other two are much younger than you and I, Ramon. Is that a thing anymore?
It is. I got kids, and that's what it is. It's still that.
Talking phase.
We just friends. We just cool.
That's right.
Our good friend Austin Price joined us this morning on RK-Dub. So we had this conversation, Austin, earlier on the show with Nico now not here and freeing up some of that money. How important is it to really continue to pad maybe these skill players, specifically the wide receiver position, for a guy like Aguilar? Could they be in the mix for a wide receiver like Trevor Pena? I know he's asking a lot of money, but once you enter that portal, Austin, you're not guaranteed anything.
No, you're not, Kayla. I think Tennessee, kicked the tires a little bit there early on. Hasn't done anything with it much since because the numbers and figures that are out there. But I think Tennessee has to add a receiver. I think to not add a receiver would be negligent. The question is who is that, right? You look at, Tennessee has, got the Keelan Marion kid from BYU coming in later in the week, so like the weekend. But is he still on the board by the time he potentially would get here? Trayshawn Hurry from San Jose was supposed to come in for a visit, and he committed last night to Louisville, so he's not coming on a visit. And so it will be interesting to see, is there anybody else in the portal that Tennessee takes a swing at here? Who gets in before the portal closes, later in the week? Potentially. But, they need to go out and add a piece at receiver, at least one. I think just one, though. I said this last night in the Monday Night Chat on VolQuest. You really like what you got out of Rodarius Jackson this spring. You really like what you got out of Travis Smith this spring. You have hopes for Joakim Dodson. You stunt your younger players by bringing in too many. But in this case, Tennessee needs to bring in one to help the younger guys and to help themselves because they don't have a lot of experience, and they still have a lot of bodies. And you get a couple of ankles and, another injury or two, and all of a sudden, you're having to throw a walk-on out there. And that's not what Tennessee wants to do. And so, they need one. But I think they really like their younger guys. So I think getting more than one would stunt the growth of a couple of really talented receivers.
Austin Price, a good friend at VolQuest, joined us this morning on RK-Dub. The draft is this week. We got it getting started on, Thursday, and there's questions about will James Pierce Jr. be in that first round on Thursday night. What is your gut on that, Austin? Will someone, I don't want to say this, but roll the dice? Because it seems like they're saying the character stuff is an issue, but the talent is there, and it takes one team to believe.
It just takes one, and that's all it takes. And so does somebody slide back into the back end of round one, right? Mm-hmm. It's got to pick early in round two. You got a team that wants to trade back and wants to, stockpile picks. Does that happen? James Pierce is an uber-talented kid, and I think if he gets drafted in the first round, Tennessee will be the first school to ever have a NBA, WNBA, Major League Baseball, and NFL first-round pick all in the same calendar year.
Wow.
I believe that to be correct. But I think, we're going to see, kind of how much, there's been all that smoke about, James's character and all that stuff, but how much of that is influenced by, how much does he drop? Is somebody just posturing, saying, we're not taking that kid. And then they're like, let him fall to us. Boom, taking it, whatever. So, you see that a lot. And then you also see teams near the back end of round one go, we're going to take the best available. And, I think a lot of it will be dependent on how James has interviewed, how teams have done background on James and to try to disprove some of the stuff that's out there. But, James is an uber-talented kid. I'm also looking, not night one, but night two, Omar Norman a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that kid.
Ooh.
I just think he's got something to him, and I'm rooting hard for that kid to go in round 2 or 3.
Austin Price of VolQuest's our guest. Austin, have you ever seen Rick Barnes gush over a prospect out of high school the way that he did in Tennessee basketball's release yesterday, announcing the signing of Nate Ament? Just how thrilled do you think this staff is, and what do they like about a prospect, Austin, that clearly has got a lot of upside?
Well, Nate Ament is one that Rick Barnes has been gushing over for months. Best players that he's seen in the high school since KD and all that stuff. Tennessee was trying to figure out, were they a possible match for Nate Ament? And they just kept working it. And there was a time where it felt like that thing's going in a different direction. And then Tennessee doubled back around and, able to get it done. A huge get with Nate Ament. And now they've got to just find some shooters to go alongside he and Jacoby Gillespie. I love the Carey kid from Vanderbilt. They've got a nice start, but they've got to add a few more bodies here. I think that's paramount, especially the shooters part of this. And so, Nate Ament is one that, we're really, we're really interested to kind of see, how he translates a kid that really is doing a fantastic job of ingratiating himself to Tennessee fans. And Rick Barnes is, as Nate told me the other night when I talked to him about his commitment, and he's like, it's hard to get Coach Barnes excited, but he got excited.
I love that quote. Austin, real quick on the way out, does it feel like the ship has sailed on Rodney Rice as Tennessee brings in an Oklahoma transfer and maybe a backup option at that shooting guard position for a visit?
Yeah, I don't want to say it's totally sailed, but it certainly feels like it's going in the other direction, right? Okay. But, at one point, Nate Ament felt like it was going in a different direction. Sure. So, you just never know. And we'll see, today's the last day of the portal. So we'll see who else goes in the portal for basketball today. And does anybody enter that Tennessee would have interest in and go from there. But, yeah, Tennessee's got to, bring in some different players. I think they got one coming in later in the week. And, I think it's important to add shooters. I think that's going to be the thing. They've got to add guys that can shoot it from the outside. That's the one thing this team's really, missing. Jacoby shoots it well from three. He had like 87 threes at Maryland last year. So he's still your point guard, right? And then, I think Nate can shoot it from the outside. But, again, that's not necessarily all his game. He's a slasher too. But they need guys that they can just, camp out there in the corner and toss it to. And, you saw what a good shooter can do for you last year with the way Chaz shot it. And then Jordan Gainey, obviously, being kind of a combo guy that can shoot it outside as well. So I think the shooters from here to the house will be the most important thing for Tennessee as they look to build around what they've already done.
He is Austin Price of VolQuest's on 3, Tuesdays at 8:20 here on Ramon, Kayla, and Will. Excellent as always, Austin. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Austin Price. I've got one huge takeaway from our conversation with Austin today. Tune in for that at 9 o'clock. We'll do that in about 20 minutes this morning. Coming up, though, there is a reporter in the NFL who is confident about one thing his team is not going to do that he covers in the first round of the NFL draft. Interesting stuff this morning on social media that we'll react to next.